Janice, are you sharing the PowerPoint?
I'm doing it right now. You guys should be seeing it anytime.
Yeah,
you see it?
See it now. You can
Okay.
just make it full screen.
Yep, I'm getting there. Sorry, I've got all these buttons opening up.
Okay. It's full screen now.
Okay, and recording is going. Madam Chair, we are good to go.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to call this meeting to order. Thank you all for being here. Looks like we've got a good crowd. And we're going to always begin our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. And can I have Lori Stone lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance today?
If everybody would stand and place your right hand over your heart, ready, begin. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the
United
United
States of
States of
America,
America
and
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Chris, I muted the conference room during the pledge. If you would please unmute it. Thank you.
Okay, Janice, will you please conduct roll call?
Absolutely. When I call your jurisdiction, if you would please be so kind as to state your name, City of Banning, City of Beaumont,
Mike, Laura,
Calamasa,
Wendy Hewitt.
Canyon Lake,
Casey Castillo.
Corona,
Jackie Casillas.
Eastville,
Christian Dinko.
Hemet,
Rose Brown,
Rupa Valley,
Chris Barajas,
Lake Elsinore,
Brian Tisdale.
Menifee,
Matt Leeswire,
Moreno Valley, Murrieta,
Lori Stone.
Norco,
Kevin Bash,
Paris,
Rita Rogers.
Riverside, San Jacinto,
Crystal Ruiz.
Temecula,
Marianne Edwards.
Wildemar,
Ben Benoit here.
County of Riverside, District 1,
Kevin Jeffries here.
District 2,
Karen Spiegel.
District 3,
Chuck Washington.
District 5,
Jeff Hewitt.
Eastern Municipal Water District,
Bill Pauly for each.
What? Western Municipal Water District.
Brenda Denstead, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Riverside County Superintendent of Schools. WRCOG TAC Chair. All right, let me go back one more time to those who did not answer. City of Banning, Moreno Valley, Riverside. I'm sorry, did somebody speak up for Moreno Valley?
Janice, no, David Happy's here for Banning.
Mr. Happy, can you make a verbal acknowledgement, please?
He's trying, he's having technical difficulties.
Thank you. Madam Chair, that concludes roll call and we have quorum.
Thank you very much. This time we'll entertain public comments. Does anybody have a comment they'd like that is not on the agenda?
Mr. Happy letting you know. So there's audio issues.
Seeing no hands. Janice, do you see any?
I see no hands. Susie, can you help me out with that, please?
I do not see any requests.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item 5, our consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and may be enacted in one motion. Prior to the motion to consider any action by the committee, any public comments of any item on the consent will be heard. Janice, do we have any members of the public with any questions?
I have no requests. I see
Does
nothing
any
in the
of my
chat.
does any of my colleagues wish to pull any item?
San Jacinto, move it.
Second, Rupa Valley.
I have a motion by San Jacinto and a second by Rupa Valley. Banning, Beaumont,
Yes.
Calamasa,
Yes.
Canyon Lake,
Yes.
Corona,
Yes.
Eastville,
Yes.
Hemet,
Yes.
Urupa Valley,
Yes.
Lake Elsinore. Lake Elsinore. Menifee,
Proudly, yes.
Moreno Valley, Murrieta,
Yes.
Norco,
Yes.
Paris,
Yes.
Riverside, San Jacinto,
Yes.
Temecula,
Aye.
Wildemar,
Yes.
County District 1,
Yes.
District 2,
Yes.
District 3,
Yes.
District 5,
Yes.
Eastern Municipal Water District,
Yes.
and Western Municipal Water District.
Yes.
That concludes roll call vote for that item and it passes unanimously.
Janice, how are we dealing with Mr. Happy, who's there? He's talking to us in chat. But he can't, his mic is offline.
And it appears committee member Tisdale's mic is having some issues. Steve, I would defer to
Yeah,
you on that.
Yeah, my feeling is if we can see their face and they're giving a thumbs up, that's good enough for our purposes.
Okay, just in my view, because I'm sharing the PowerPoint, I can't see everybody's faces. So if somebody wants to tell me a thumbs up for banning, that's great.
Janice, I don't see him on the line.
Oh, did he drop off?
Yeah, Janice, I do see Mr. Tisdale.
Yes, he was having
Thumbs
some
up on
mic.
Tisdale.
Mr. Tisdale, did you want to vote on the consent calendar, sir?
Yeah. he's
Did you
voting.
not hear
He
me?
gave us a thumbs
No,
up.
we did not hear you.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
No.
So again, last chance. Mr. Happy, are you on the call? Text in the chat box if you can.
He just rejoining.
He
us.
just
he's rejoining.
rejoined. He probably restarted his computer.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and move on and we can go back and get his vote on the consent if he chooses to be a part of that. We're moving on to item 6. These are reports, and the first one is Cal City's activities update. Ms. Aaron, Sassy?
Hello. Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. It's nice to see all of you today. The governor has until October 10th, so this Sunday, to sign or veto any remaining bills. It seems like he's doing them in chunks by subject area. So I just wanted to give you an update of where we stand right now. 2 of the bills that he did sign that we were supporting are, one is SB 60, which would allow cities and counties to increase the fine for violations in short-term rentals to up to $5,000. So I know that for those of you that allow short-term rentals, this is a significant increase in what you can fine these bad actors. So that's something that we think is positive. Also, AB 361, which will allow for the continuance of virtual meetings. We wouldn't have been able to do this today had he not signed this legislation, because the governor's executive order did expire on September 30th. So we are very happy that AB 361 was signed, so you can continue virtual meeting options. A lot of the housing bills that we've been opposing this year, SB 8, SB 9, AB 215, did get signed last week by the governor. I know that this is going to make a lot of complications for many of your jurisdictions. We'll continue to fight. I know that we're already gearing up for next year, and I think there'll be some additional housing legislation, but unfortunately he did sign many of those measures that we had been opposed to. We are still waiting on several bills for him to sign. The broadband funding bills, AB 14 and SB 4, he has yet to sign. I do suspect he will, but that would give some additional funding for all of you for broadband technology. We are also waiting on some of the pandemic relief bills. So AB 61, SB 314, and SB 389. This would allow, also AB 773. This would allow the continuance of a lot of the executive orders that allowed the restaurants to use some of the outdoor dining spaces, some of the to-go beverage options, using some of the parking spots to close down some of the streets so that your businesses had additional space. Those are all still on his desk. Also, SB 619, this is the organic waste bill that we had been supporting that would Well, it changed several times, but basically at this point, if your jurisdiction is working with Cal Recycle and explaining where you're at in terms of the SB 1383 implementation, if you work with them, they'll defer any sort of punishments for a year. So that one is sitting on the governor's desk. In the budget junior bill that was signed recently, there was $60 million allocated to help local jurisdictions with the implementation of SB 1383. We've been asking for 250 million. So obviously 60 million is significantly less than that, but it's much better than nothing. So there is some funding available for that. We have a couple bills that we're still waiting the governor to act on that we'd like to be vetoed. One of them is SB 556. This is the FCCC streetlight poles, putting the different, you wouldn't have the authority to regulate what communication devices would go on some of these public spaces, including your light poles. So we're waiting on that one. AB 339 was another Brown Act bill that really only applies to our large cities, but you'd have to continue in-person options for virtual meetings. So we're waiting on that as well, but I'm sure there'll be a lot of activity in this last week. We did have our annual conference just recently. I know some of you were at that. Just a recap of what happened in terms of the resolutions, at least. There were 2 resolutions, one having to do with railways and cleaning up some of the area around them. That one had some amendments. It did move forward with the amended version. And then there was the sales tax allocation one. The recommendation that was voted on by the body was to send back the resolution to our policy committees with a strong recommendation that the city managers working group that had been working on it before, it goes back to that. It would have to be reformed. So it will go back to a new city manager working group. And then we do have some new leadership here in Riverside County. Our next meeting will be November 8th. I believe it will be in person. I don't know where it will be yet, but stay tuned for that. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Do you have any questions for Aaron? Okay, thank you very much, Aaron.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item B, our TUMP program Nexus study update. Chris?
Thank you, members of the committee. This is Chris Gray, WCOG Deputy Executive Director, and I have the honor and the privilege to oversee the TUMP program. To give everyone a little bit of background, TUMP program was implemented in 2003. The idea was to address regional transportation impacts of to mitigate the impacts of transportation impacts of new development on a regional basis. Like all fee studies, the TUMP program relies on a nexus study, which identifies projects and the fee schedule. We have done updates to the nexus study in 2005, 2009, 2011, and 2017. And we're bringing forward today a proposal to do a new update. Next slide, please. So I just want to, for the record, state our philosophy of the program, which is we are the manager of the program. The TUMP program is successful because the majority of program decisions are made by our major member agencies and partners, the types of projects that get funded, how that funding is allocated. The planning, design, and constructions of projects is done by those parties, not WCOG, and this is a regional program. Next slide, please. So what does the TUMP program mitigate? As I said, it is traffic caused by new development. TUMP funds arterial widening, interchange improvements, grade separation of bridges. It does not fund freeway improvements. The way we look at it is that it's funding the middle mile. So it does not fund local streets and does not fund freeway projects. Next slide, please. So one of the questions that we have gotten in terms of how the TUMP program works is, does the TUMP program penalize areas with lower housing costs? We recognize that there's a lot of variation in housing prices throughout the region. And I wanted to share with you is TUMP is a small part of the cost of a new home. Even within our region, within the large variation, there's very little difference in the TUMP fee as a percentage of the home price. And I also wanted to say that it has been our experience that the cost of asphalt materials or labor is very similar whether a project is in Banning or Temecula. So if you're curious why TUMP has a uniform fee. That is the reason why. Next slide, please. So one of the questions that's come up is, does TUMP as it stands conflict with state policies, AB 32, SB 375, SB 743? So I wanted to say this. TUMP provides infrastructure for the region, and this region is growing. Some parts of the region are growing differently than others. I would point out, for example, we just attended the State of the City of Lake Elsinore. Lake Elsinore is expecting significant growth. Looking around those faces I see today, not all areas are the same. So the level of development anticipated in Calimesa is much different than the level in Norco. But we need to have a program that serves all of them. And because of that, we need to think out what the needs of our region are 20 to 30 to 40 years out. And that's what TUMP does. Next slide, please. So one of the questions that's come up is, what's the timeline and commitment needed for a Nexus study? A Nexus study is approximately a 12 to 18 months. We are asking also for permission to do a development fee impact and a VMT study. Those will take 6 to 12 months. But the Nexus study itself is a minimum of 12 to 18 months, and it will cost approximately $200,000. That's an amount that we have budgeted within our budget for this fiscal year. Next slide, please. So why are we bringing this to you today? First of all, this is best practices. Nexus study preparation is governed by AB 1600 and a variety of other government regulations. It is best practice to regularly update Nexus studies. Why? Because things change. And I would specifically point out that there is language in the administrative plan that asks us to come back every 4 years to recommend whether we should be doing a Nexus study update or not. Next slide, please. Secondly, the growth forecasts have changed, as I have said. We have had significant growth. So just so everyone knows, between 2000 and 2020, the region doubled in size. From 2000, over the last 10 years, the region has increased significantly, and while growth will taper off, we're expecting the region to grow by another 33% over the next 20 years. But when we look at future growth, when we look at growth projections versus the last Nexus study and this Nexus study, what we've noticed is that the regional growth forecasts developed by SCAG are projecting less employment. So more households, less employment. That in and of itself is a reason to update the Nexus study. Next slide, please. Third, we all know travel behavior has changed. The last Nexus study was done pre-COVID. COVID has brought profound changes in how we travel, where we travel, when we travel. Less in-person shopping, more deliveries was already happening. The pandemic has simply accelerated that. So here's a statistic I'd like to throw out. Online shopping and deliveries have doubled over the last 5 years, and they're expected to double again over the next 5 years. Additionally, working at home and working remotely is now a fact of life for many of the residents of our region. We have telehealth, we have remote schooling, things that weren't even being allowed 5 years ago are happening now. Next slide, please. Another issue is we've had a substantial amount of projects be completed. The I-15 Cajalco Road interchange, which I had the honor to go to the ribbon cutting for, the I-215 Scott Road interchange, Clinton Keith extension, Foothill Parkway extension. These 4 projects on the screen represent approximately $200 million of improvements. Those projects have been completed, but are in the old Nexus study. Updating the Nexus study will allow us to remove these projects and do a comprehensive update to the project list. Next slide, please. And then finally, the Nexus study gives us an opportunity to rethink what kind of projects TUMP funds. As I said in the beginning, TUMP currently funds roadway widenings, interchanges, grade separations, bridges. A number of agencies have asked us, well, is it time to think about other projects we might want to fund? And so over the past 6 months, we've gone through a comprehensive process with our public works directors and our partner agencies, specifically RCTC and RTA, to determine what types of projects should be added. The result of that is a recommendation, which is one of the action items today, to add a new project type, which we're calling smart corridors. I'll talk about that a little bit more. in some subsequent slides. Next slide, please. So at an admin and finance meeting, Supervisor Washington said he believed it was time to rethink the T in transportation. We have taken that on, and as I said, we have had these discussions, and we have considered, is it appropriate to add additional transit projects, additional bicycle pedestrian projects? We believe it is staff's recommendation that we add ITS projects, but not transit and bicycle pedestrian at this time, and I'll tell you why. Next slide, please. The reason why is we have received pushback from our partner agencies and our public works directors where they are concerned about watering down the program. ITS projects are routinely completed by our member agencies using funds they get from a variety of sources. However, our transit projects are really overseen by RTA. At this time, their priority is not capital funding, but really operational funding. Secondly, there are existing state grant programs for bicycle and pedestrian projects. In fact, it may be easier in the near future for you to get grant funding for a new bicycle and pedestrian pathway versus a traditional roadway. Because of that, our partner agencies and our public works directors have asked that we only add ITS projects at this time. Next slide, please. I also want to point out that one of our recommendations is to ask you for permission to formally investigate some type of VMT mitigation program. The reason why we are asking that is several years ago, the state implemented SB 743, and it requires CEQA impacts of transportation to focus on VMT instead of congestion. Because of that, we have developers contacting us, asking us about VMT mitigation measures. At this time, we have no program. RCTC and RTA do not have a program as well. They have asked to partner with us on this, and SVCTA is a potential partner because they are considering a program as well. While this is related to the Nexus study, is not a formal part of the Nexus study, but it's an important part of an action we're asking you to take today. Next slide, please. So as I said, we don't bring this recommendation in isolation. We've had regular recurring talks with RCTC and RTA. We will continue to work with them through the Nexus study process. I would just add that RCTC has said they consider it best practice to conduct Nexus study updates on a regular basis, as all agencies do. RTA is very comfortable with the existing process we have. They receive funding directly from the TUMP program, and they are both RCTC and RTA are very interested in VMT mitigation. And I do want to say for the record, we're not anticipating any changes to the existing MOUs we have with RCA, RCTC, or RTA as part of this process. Next slide, please. And finally, as Aaron had shared with you, the governor's been very busy signing bills. Well, one bill that hasn't got a lot of attention, but it's very impactful on WRCOG is AB 602. AB 602 specifically governs how any development fee program, whether it be for water, transportation, local impact fees, how those programs are to be operated and how Nexus studies are to be done. It specifically calls for changes in Nexus studies to calculate fees based on the square footage of homes rather than as a per unit basis. That is a significant and fundamental change to how TUMP works. Staff is working very closely with our legal counsel to determine the exact requirements of that bill. I will also add it has some language in there that seems to imply that Nexus studies need to be done on a regular basis. I believe it says 8 years. So clearly there will be some impact on TUMP, and it's necessary for us to do a Nexus study update to address these new requirements from the state. Next slide, please. So what I wanted to say is we have taken this, as is our practice, through all of our WRCOG committees. We brought it first to an Administration and Finance Committee. They approved staff recommendations. It was brought to planning directors. They approved staff recommendations. Public Works Technical Advisory Committee approved staff's recommendations. We're here for action from the Executive Committee. Next slide, please. So in summary, I would say staff is bringing forward our recommendation to update the TUMP Nexus study based on best practices for fee studies, or changes in growth forecasts and travel behavior and other factors. Our partner agencies support this effort. The WRCOG committees support this effort. And we now have new legislation, which is going to, I dare say I use the word require, but direct us to do a Nexus study update. Next slide, please. So I just, in conclusion, say we have 4 requested actions. 1 is direct staff begin work on a Nexus study update. 2, direct staff to update the TUMP administrative plan to add a new project type. 3, direct staff to work with RCTC and RTA and a VMT mitigation approach. And then 4, direct staff to work on a development fee study, which we will be sharing with you all. And Madam Chair, that is my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Got questions. Okay, we'll start. Jackie Casillas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am in support of this Nexus study. I think it's just good governance to not put these things off, because then, you know, making up ground just ends up really having a major impact. But my question is, in the study itself, what role do we as partner agencies play? Will we be interviewed? Will our Public Works Department be interviewed? I'd like to learn a little bit more about what role we play.
Sure. So technically, you're actually a member agency, so you have even more of a role. So as part of the process, I will be first coordinating with your planning directors to share with them the growth forecast assumptions. I will be regularly meeting with your Public Works directors and their staff to review the projects that go into the Nexus study. The project cost data will also be shared with your Public Works director, and we will be bringing back regular updates of the project to share with you at the various committees. And then finally, we will also be sharing with you, roughly in about a 6 to 12 month period of time, our analysis of the impact fees. This is a comprehensive study of all impact fees, water, school, local fees, park fees, all of the fees. We generally share that with the city managers and the planning directors, as well as our elected officials, because that is a question that routinely comes up. So bottom line is, you're going to be seeing a lot of us over the next 12 to 18 months. Your staff will be seeing a lot of us. This is a major effort by staff. And the reason why we are asking you for your permission before we get started is it's such a heavy lift for staff and our consultants to do this work.
Thank you. Wendy Hewitt.
Yes, I wanted to know, are we going to be voting on this if you do raise the rates? I mean, if you do initiate a fee for the Nexus study, because I would like to vote on that. I mean, I feel like we're already raising the TUMP fees, so you know how
yes. Yeah, so here's the process. Your vote today is simply to ask your permission to do the study. Once the study is complete, it will be brought through our committees as with everything else. And you are taking no action today to change the current fee levels. You are simply giving us permission. And let me reiterate this. The reason why we are going through this process is this is a major work effort. And I don't want to come back to you in 12 months with a document and one of you says, why are you guys doing that? Why are you folks doing this? I never approved this. And just in the interest of transparency and the interest of just good practice, we want your permission to start the work.
Can I ask one more question, or?
Sure.
You said it costs $200,000 that you've already allocated. Has that raised in the last 5 years, or with Nexus studies, is that a standard amount, or?
That's generally about how much we spend. I would say that we have a cost estimate from one of our on-call consultants to do the work. It's about $200,000 plus or minus. And the funding for that is provided by, there's a portion of all the TUMP fees which go back to WRCOG for the program administration. And we, in between Nexus study years, save up that money. So we have the funding for the Nexus study.
Thank you, Chris.
Yep.
Okay, I'm just gonna let you know, I've been writing down as your hands go up. Next was Mike Laura, followed by Jeff Hewitt, then Krista Reese, Marianne Edwards, and Dave Happy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one quick question and one, I guess, request. Question is on, Chris, can you please kind of give me an example of the swap that you identify in the plan?
Sure. So to give a little bit of background, when we were discussing with the Public Works Committee the idea that they could add ITS projects to the network. They had asked that we do it in a way so it does not cause significant increases in the fee, because essentially they're projects that would be added. And what we have done in the past is we require agencies to do a swap. What a swap means, if you're going to add a $5 million project, you find a $5 million project that's already in the TUMP program that has not been completed, for which you could request funding. That project comes out and your new project comes in.
Thank you. And then my request would be, typically after Nexus study, the fees almost always go up. And then what happens is developers, and I understand the reason for it, request a phasing of the fees. I believe last time WRCOG phased in fees, we lost over, I want to say over $1 million by phasing it in, which kind of destroys the point of the Nexus studies. So what I'd like to consider is, while we do this Nexus study, is maybe come up with options at the end that allow a phasing of fees that take into consideration what the time that we spread it out over, so that we don't lose money.
Sure.
It just seems kind of redundant to do a Nexus study, establish a fee, and then phase it out, and take up a program that in phasing that was never considered in the Nexus study. So I just would like to consider that in this one.
Sure, we can, yeah, we can certainly do that. I would also add too, for those of you who maybe have not been through the Nexus study like Mike has, I just want to add an item of information. When we bring this to the board, we actually ask you to take two separate actions. One is you accept or reject the Nexus study as a standalone document. The second action you take is to set the fee level. So back in 2017, the executive committee took the following actions. They accepted the Nexus study and they set the fees in a way to implement them, as Mr. Laura said, in a phased fashion. We would be happy to look at some different phasing scenarios as we bring this forward. And as I said, this is something we'll be working on for a while. So we'll have plenty of opportunity to look at the some different options as we bring it forward.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Reggie Hewitt.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Look, I was really happy to see that the majority of this body didn't want to get too far into all these other things, and they want to stay with what got us here: bridges and widening and stuff on roads that are arterial and stuff. I think that's great. But I'm going to be voting no on all four of these points. I believe that not only do Nexus studies usually lead a horse, but also force that horse to drink water. We've been through a couple of them already, and whether it's phased in or not, houses right now, the median house is now over 800,000 in California. I don't think that that's going to be sustained that high. I think there's going to be quite a drop, and then these fees become a bigger portion of what the sales price is anyway. So look, at VMT is just another way to squeeze more blood out of the rock. And like I say, we need to look for more efficiencies in getting our things done, but I don't think this is the way to go. Plus we saved $200,000. So that's why I will be voting no.
Krista Reese.
Thank you. Let me see if I can lower that hand there. There we go. So Chris, how often is it required for us to do a Nexus study?
So our admin plan says we should bring back a item for consideration every 4 years, which we are doing. There's some language in AB 602, which I believe says you have to adopt a new Nexus study no less than every 8 years. I will say, though, we have not finished the analysis, so please don't quote me on that. But it was the version that I saw that was making its way through the legislature had an 8-year timeline. So just to point out to everyone's benefit, 8, you may think, well, we have plenty of time. However, it is 2021 now. We're talking about a year and a half, 2022, 2023. Then we have to go through the adoption process. So since our last study was in 2017, we really would need to take action either this year or I'm guessing no later than next year to make sure we're compliant, if our interpretation of state law is correct.
So what we're doing is complying with the laws, what I'm getting at. And as you pointed out, and very well said, that it takes a long time to complete one of these and to go through all the final steps that are required to comply with law. And that is important for us to understand. The other thing that I want everybody to understand is all the work that you've done in so far has been quite a bit. And when you do a Nexus study, and we have those of us who've been on these boards long enough, or even in your own cities might have done them, we understand the effort and the energy and all of this that goes into these things. But on the other side of it, sometimes I think a couple of people made comments that the Nexus study is definitely going to end up with an increase in fees. Not necessarily. Was it that way in 2017? Did we recommend an increase in all fees?
Yeah, the fees went up by about roughly, I would say about 10% across the board. But this board actually took action to cut the retail fee in half and freeze the retail fee, which was just raised this year. So you as a legislative body have substantial discretion in setting the fee, implementing the fee, how the fee is implemented. So I wanted to say, really, there's two things to keep in mind. One, you as a body have substantial discretion on how you implement fees. And secondly, one way to keep the fee down is to limit the projects that we add. And so there's really two competing issues. We have the public works directors who are wanting to add projects, and then we have elected officials such as yourself that want to keep the fee down. So we have a variety of processes and procedures set up to limit how projects can be added. So for example, we have formal criteria that a project, for example, must have 4 lanes, must carry more than 25,000 cars in the future, and the like. So there are techniques and strategies we can use to limit the projects that get added. But if you go hog wild or willy-nilly and add, hundreds of projects, the fee's obviously going to go up.
But we as a legislative body have the ability to deny fee increases. And that's what some of the steps, as you said, that we've taken in the past. And that's what the newer council members or new mayors or mayor pro tem that are on the board need to understand, that we do have that ability to say no. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done in limiting that, especially, the retail part. We knew that we were hurting. We knew that home sales will go up. And I agree with Supervisor Hewitt that we're going to see a radical change coming up. So I think that the ability that we should, have should be, when you recommend, whatever options that we need to take, we should have multiple options. And in other words, we should have the ability to phase something in, or we may say, hey, we want to not implement something until another couple of years just to see. And then before we implement, we're going to take a vote just to confirm that we want to implement this, because we know that coming up here, we're going to see a terrible decrease in retail sales. We know that VMT tax, that's going to kill our region. Anyone who's not living close to Riverside, close to Temecula, these larger cities, we're going to be hurting because our folks are driving. And as much as we want to say that remote work is increasing, yes, it is. But what I'm finding out recently is that people who are applying for jobs are not even close to getting these jobs. So they're not coming home here, and we need to be, acutely aware of it. I'm really proud of the work we're doing. And in the end, before we're finished here, when everybody's done with their questions, I would like to make the motion to approve this as requested by the staff.
I will second it, but I have comments. Temecula.
Go on,
I'll
Mayor
second the
Edwards.
discussion.
It's your turn to speak, Mayor.
Oh, okay, thank you. We're overlooking a couple of things. We're considering the housing side and the development side, but we're not considering the cost of construction to build these major regional projects that are beneficial to each of our cities. So that we have to factor that in too. There have been several consecutive years that no increase was seen or imposed. And then we did do a decrease. A decrease was approved in 2017. So just because we have a nexus study, that doesn't necessarily mean the fees will go up. I know there's a fear of that, but I would rather be the visionary city taking the lead in doing a comprehensive nexus study before we're told we have to, than the county that, you know, we can't bury our heads in the sands. And how will we know how to proceed if we don't know what the need is or where the need has shifted? Housing is shifting. So we cannot sustain the prices that we're looking at right now. I mean, you know, 1,100 square feet for $800,000. It's incredible. So, but this program has worked, and it's worked beautifully. Whatever the nexus, whatever the fees are, the TUMP fees are, the developers are going to list their houses for the most money they can get every time. And I don't mean that in a bad way. They're going to have, you know, the largest profit margin that they can. They're going to get the most money that they can, regardless of what the fees are. So I say, you know, don't, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I think we need to get out ahead of the governor and ahead of the legislature so that we'll have, we'll better know where we stand. And maybe there won't be, you know, maybe we won't need to do increases for a while.
Thank you. Mr. Happy.
Thank you for the good order. I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. I'd kind of like to get back to sort of a basic question in regards to, since we're talking about a nexus study to update fees and analyze the development impact fees and et cetera. Sort of the basic question on fees versus taxes versus Prop 26. Can you discuss that a little bit? These are considered fees. They're not considered tax. It's not considered a tax for that reason. Is that right? Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yes. So development impact fees are fees. They are not taxes. They are the law, I believe the state law that sets forward the process by which a fee is established, implemented, collected, administered is AB 1600. And one of the key requirements of AB 1600 is the preparation of a nexus study, which lays out the fee, how the fee is calculated, the data that goes into the fee calculation, and the fee as it's assessed. So for example, a park fee, a school fee, a water fee, all of these development impact fees that are charged have to follow the same general process. So to answer your question, this is a fee and not a tax. And there's an established process for setting fees, and we are following that process.
Okay, very good. So that leads me sort of into the next question, which is, since we're addressing fees, this is most of the TUMP fees are derived from residential, but is also a commercial component that commercial projects also have to participate in TUMP fees, and they participate at a different rate. I think your slideshow only addressed the residential. Is that correct?
No, we're going to do a comprehensive update. What one of my earlier slides had addressed, because we often get the question, doesn't TUMP adversely affect areas where there are lower housing prices? And we wanted to show how TUMP fee as a percentage of the total price of a house varies, but not by very much. But to answer your question, TUMP is collected on all new development, whether it's industrial, commercial, office, residential. TUMP fees are collected. There is a list of developments who are exempt from TUMP. So for example, public buildings, we do not collect TUMP on public buildings. We do not collect TUMP on public schools. We do not collect TUMP on churches. And then one of the more obscure ones is we do not collect TUMP on dog kennels and catteries. But what I would say is 99% of the new development in Western Riverside County pays TUMP, and that the amount they pay is set forward by our Nexus study.
Okay, so I'm not familiar with the fees that are applied to commercial development. But in relation to residential development, it's a set fee regardless of the value of the project. And I do have a
Correct.
major issue with that, sir. And I can't speak about commercial projects. If a commercial project's worth $100 million and it only pays, you know, a tenth of 1% on TUMF fee, whereas a $1 million project pays, you know, 2%, that doesn't make sense to me. And let's go to the residential side. If one person is paying a 3% TUMF fee is baked into the cost of that housing unit, and their neighbor is only paying 2%, that doesn't make sense to me. And it also, I believe, adversely affects people on a lower, you know, that just can't afford. Yes, you know, if I could afford a $600,000 house, I can afford to pay 2% instead of 3%. That would be my choice. But it's kind of a baked in thing where you know, I just think it should be based on a percentage. And if we're going to examine the fees, we're going to examine the rates. That and there's another connected issue to that. First of all, there's the fairness issue that we all pay 2% or 2.5%, whatever the percentage is. But the other advantage of that is you might not have to look at increasing fees because it's going to be reflected of the value of the project. And as we know, the value of projects keep increasing due to the cost of everything. But it would be a sort of a built-in escalator on our you know, revenue of TUMF fees or TUMF revenues if it was based on the project value rather than a flat rate fee.
So to answer your question to that, I can send you a copy of we have done 2 studies of development impact fees throughout Western Riverside County, one in 2016, one in 2019. I can tell you that all projects pay roughly the same, whether they're commercial or residential, pay roughly the same percentage, TUMF as a percentage of their total overall cost. I will also add that one of the requirements of AB 602, which is the new state law, is that we have to change how we calculate fees on residential projects. And they're going to require that we calculate the fee based on the square footage. So our approach to calculating fees for residential projects is going to have to completely change. So to your point, rather than being based on value, we are going to be required by state law to base it on square footage. So what I would say is right now, it is collected based on a per unit basis. So a person in Banning pays the same amount as a person in Temecula. And one of the reasons they do that is the U in TUMF is uniform. So that is going to be an interesting change we're going to have to make. But what I would say is we have noticed that one of the differences in the regions are you don't necessarily build the same square footage house in different regions. So I live in the unincorporated county. Many of the homes in my neighborhood are 3,000 to 4,000 square feet. If you look at other parts of the county, the homes tend to be much smaller. So long story short, we're going to have to completely revise how we calculate residential fees. And I believe by going to a per square foot basis, it will get a little bit closer to the value, as you have noted.
Right, a little closer. So how's that going to impact commercial projects? Are they going to use the same?
Commercial projects, right? Commercial projects are calculated on a per square foot basis, based by the use. So a 1,000 square foot. So the fee for a retail project is approximately $8 per square foot. So a $5,000 retail project pays $40,000. The fee for an office is approximately $5 per square foot. And the fee for industrial is about $2 per square foot. So we don't need to change the way we calculate fees for commercial projects because we already do it that way.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your input. I'm glad to see that we're going to be so part of this Nexus study will be including the reevaluation and actually by direction of state law, the changing of how residential fees are calculated, and I'm glad to hear that. So thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to try to maybe redirect some of the focus of the discussion, and maybe at the risk of turning a few votes, yes votes into no, but I know we have a motion and a second.
Yeah.
But what I want to point out is in the late 1990s, when there was the boom that was going on with development, and I was here for that because my family and I moved to Southwest Riverside County in 1989. What we were starting to notice is that there was significant traffic congestion with reference to state legislation and creating a mitigation fee, not a tax, a fee. What we were tasked with doing was creating a mitigation fee that sought to mitigate traffic congestion. With that in mind, the approach that was taken with this mitigation fee was for every new home, and planners do this, they calculate how many vehicle trips per house are typical. And then they calculate how many vehicle trips per day on a given roadway. And they calculate from there how much roadway is needed to accommodate that traffic to produce levels of service no worse than fill in the blank. So that is why we arrived at a mitigation fee that was uniform for each house, because each house was assumed to have contributed so many trips per day, so much traffic congestion on a given roadway. That's why it wasn't based on the value of the home, which I think would then probably turn it into a tax, much like property tax. So we have a mitigation fee. Then we have to do a study. And the study, like any nexus study, points out the nexus of the development to the congestion. Is this particular development creating congestion? And if so, how much and where? That then created a plan by which certain projects would get done, and the developers gladly contributed to the fund, not gladly, but they did, because they were still making lots of money selling homes. And they knew if people could not move on the arterial roadways to get to the freeways, they wouldn't want to buy a house because they couldn't predict how long it might take them to get to work. So it worked. But the only way we stay, I think, in conformance with what the law requires is if we do regular nexus studies, so that we keep that connection between the impact of development and the need for projects. Right from the beginning, because we electeds are very reluctant to raise fees, we never did collect enough money to build all of the projects that we included in the program. So the program has always been short of money. Okay, oh well. Years back, we talked about cutting the fees in half. And then local jurisdictions found out that they would have to make whole the other half of the project that they wanted to get built, but they wanted to collect half the money. So that lasted for a year or two. We went back to full implementation of the TUMF fee, and yet still we come up short because building costs have gone up. So I hope that none of us are fooling ourselves that there are any free lunches. If we want projects to get built, somebody's got to pay for it. The ones that are creating more traffic should at least carry their own weight, because those that are already here don't want to pay for the traffic congestion for the new homes that are getting built. Do we need more homes? Yes, but that's the reason we need to do the nexus study. And the next debate we'll have is, do we want to have fees associated with what the nexus study says we should have? And if we don't, we just won't get as many projects done. I'm a yes vote.
Well stated. Thank you, Supervisor Washington. Mr. Dinko?
Thank you. I appreciate that. And by the way, I wanted to thank Supervisor Washington for some of his explanation. That's not the reason I raised my hand, but kind of clarified a few things and like the origination and theory behind fee versus but that's not in favor of the Nexus study, but I have a question referring to the IT projects and intelligent transformations. My question was, what do those look like? At a whole nother category. I was just hoping to get a little bit better understanding what kind of projects that entails. I'm just a little bit curious. As I'm sitting here, I started looking them.
He's been having Wi-Fi issues.
So, Madam Chair, if I could, I believe Mr. Dingo's question was, what are some examples of ITS projects? What I would say is these are physical improvements that are designed to improve the flow of traffic without widening the roadway. Typical ITS projects include, but are not limited to, things like installing new traffic signals, coordinating traffic signals, adding in permanent messaging signs. It also includes fiber optic connections between traffic signals to allow the signals to communicate between each other. I will add that these types of physical improvements have been implemented throughout the region and throughout the country for roughly the last 30 years. So there's an established list of what is allowed, of what they're typically considered. And there's a number of other regional funding programs. For example, CVAG has a funding program, SVCTA has a funding program, OCTA has a funding program, and we would look for those other established programs to develop the list of this. I did get a call from member Laura to ask me if this would include, for example, temporary message signs. It would not. So these would be physical improvements in the ground or attached to a signal pole or somehow something that is basically not going anywhere.
He's not yet logged on. I have a couple quick questions.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for that explanation, Chris.
Oh, you're back on?
Yep.
I'm sorry, I can't see you, Chris. Okay, my question is, how long does the study take?
I'd say about 12 to 18 months based on our previous studies.
Okay. And in here we talk about working with RCTC, RTA. What about SBCTA?
We would not be working, well, I'm sorry. On the Nexus study itself, we would not be working with SBCTA. SBCTA, though, has developed a VMT mitigation proposal that we would want to coordinate with to determine if a by-county mitigation proposal would be appropriate. Basically, I would rather not reinvent the wheel. And if they have something we could partner with on, that would make sense. Okay. That would be our sole coordination. Yes.
SBCTA, so sure. The last question is, with all the new housing bills coming on with, SB9 sore spots.
Yes.
How would those affect as this is moving forward?
That is going to be really challenging for us to do. I have to be direct and say, I don't exactly know this second how we would integrate that in the study. I will say, though, that what we believe is accurate are the population projections we've been provided from the Department of Finance and others. I believe what we're going to need to do is look into how those population growth might be met within the new state law. It's going to require us to do some research and some additional thinking. But we are definitely aware of that. And that is something that we are very much going to dive into if we get permission to move forward.
Okay. I see no more speakers. We do have a
I think Mr. Leesmeyer was waving.
Yeah.
Or I saw him.
Thank you. I couldn't find the raise my hand button. My question is actually for Supervisor Hewitt. Circling back to your comments, Jeff, I want to understand your reason for the no vote and your correlation to house prices. As I understand, the two have nothing to do with each other. So I want to try to understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, Matt, thanks for the question. No, it's harder and harder right now for, we talk about we need more affordable housing. The last thing, I'm not saying that we don't have congestion. I'm not saying that some of these things don't have to be addressed. And as actually Supervisor Washington so ably stated, that we've been short, no matter how many times we raise these fees, there's always less projects done than what we'd like to, or what different studies will show that we actually need. But on the other side of what you're saying is, look, it's just a real simple thing in my mind, that if you're trying to make it more affordable for working people that want to stay in the state, just tacking on more and more. I mean, that there's only so many straws that a camel's back will take. So that's about as short as answer as you get from me.
I mean, but as it relates to TUMF and roads and infrastructure, I mean, the more housing we're, the more housing that's shoved down our throat, local agencies are tasked with having to build this infrastructure at a cost that we can't control. So do we just bend over and let everybody move in and not build our roads? I'm trying to understand how you get there.
Well, don't forget, we're still getting $10,000 for every unit right now. I mean, it's not that we're not getting money, so it's not a matter of
time.
And we also, as Mary Ann said, it went down after the 2017. It only went down in one category, the retail, that was a small part of the overall. It went up, as Chris said, 10%. So even in the last Nexus study, even though we did a phased in approach over a couple of years, it was still another 10% increase. So that's the logic of my decision.
Okay.
Understand this motion is just to give approval for a Nexus study. We're not voting on any amounts or any fees. So we do have a motion. We have a second. Can we please take roll? Wake up, Janice.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, say that one more time.
We have a motion. Janice, can you call the roll?
Yes, I have a motion from San Jacinto and a second from Temecula. City of Banning,
Yes.
Beaumont,
Yes.
Calamasa,
No.
Canyon Lake,
Yes.
Corona,
Yes.
Eastvale,
Yes.
Hemet,
Yes.
Rupa Valley,
Yes.
Lake Elsinore,
Yes.
Menifee,
Yes.
Moreno Valley, Murrieta,
Yes.
Norco,
Yes.
Paris,
Yes.
Riverside, San Jacinto, City of San Jacinto.
Still on, can you hear me?
Can barely hear you.
Yes.
Thank you. Temecula,
Aye.
Wildemar,
Yes.
District 1,
Yes.
District 2,
Yes.
District 3,
Yes.
District 5,
No.
and the water districts do not vote on TUMF matters. That item passes with no votes from Calamasa and District 5.
Okay. We are now moving on to C, and this is update from the Eastern Municipal Water District and the Western Municipal Water Districts.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Joe Mawad, the General Manager of Eastern Municipal Water District. I'll be presenting this afternoon's information with Craig Miller, the General Manager of Western Municipal Water District. So we do appreciate your time this afternoon. Wanted to briefly provide you with an overview on each of our respective water agencies. Also discuss the current statewide drought emergency declaration by the governor, and discuss our regional drought messaging and outreach efforts and each of our respective and collaborative drought response plans. We also want to touch upon opportunities for continued collaboration among all the stakeholders in the region. Let's go on to the next slide, please. So a little bit on each of the agencies overview. Many of you are familiar with Eastern. We essentially serve the area between the city of Moreno Valley down to Temecula in the south, from Hemet and San Jacinto in the east to the I-215 corridor, including the cities of Menifee and Paris. We were established back in 1950. We're somewhat unique in that we are both a wholesale and a retail water, wastewater, and recycled water agency. We are the 6th largest water provider in the state, and we serve approximately 1 million residents in Western Riverside County. One thing I wanted to point to in the graph is currently our board president is Phil Pauly, who is also our WRCOG representative. Currently, our water supply portfolio, as shown here in the pie chart, we're about 50% reliant on imported water through Metropolitan Water District, who is our wholesaler, whereas about 50% of our water is locally produced. And that is a strategic objective of ours, is as we continue to grow, and I know there was a lot of discussion during the TUMF discussion about growth. Well, in fact, we're only about 38% built out in EMW service area. So there's significant amount of growth yet to occur. So we are making the investments in our local resources to make sure we have that diversity in our water supply portfolio and that water system resiliency to be able to accommodate growth as it occurs. From a budgetary perspective, we have an annual operating budget of approximately $386 million, but we also have a very broad capital improvement program, approximately $535 million over the next 5 years. And again, we are a member, one of 26 members of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, who imports our water to this region. Let's go on to the next slide, please. And I'm going to turn it over to Craig Miller at this point.
All right, thanks, Joe. Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be here. My name is Craig Miller. I'm the general manager at Western. So you'll notice some similarities between Eastern and Western. Western was formed in the 50s also. We do provide water, wastewater, and recycled water services. We, very similar to Eastern, we serve a population of nearly 1 million people. We're fairly similar in size, 500 square miles. A little bit different than Eastern. As our service area grew, some of the cities were already providing retail water service to their customers. So we've picked up some of the areas in between. So like Eastern, we're both a wholesale and a resale provider. We serve about 100,000 people with our retail service. We have about 14 agencies that we actually partner with to provide wholesale water to those agencies. We are a MET member agency, just like Eastern, so we are one of the 38 member agencies. Next slide, please. So here's our board. We have 5-member board. Brenda Denstead is the president, and on the call today, she's our WRCOG representative. Next slide. So Joe was talking about the mix of imported and local water. For us, this is really important. When we were first formed, and actually until about 5 years ago, we were almost 100% dependent on Met water for our retail service area. Some of our cities are pumping quite a bit of groundwater, but for our retail service area, we were 100% Met reliant, which is never a good thing. If something would happen to the pipeline that feeds our service area, our customers, that 100,000 customers would be in trouble. So we've gone to great lengths to develop projects and programs to produce local water so we don't have that dependence. And then our cities and member agencies are all doing exactly the same thing. So overall, we're about a 50% demand on metropolitan imported water, just like Eastern is. But from our retail service area, we've made great strides to implement local water development projects. Next slide. All right, so why are we here today? So you've all heard on the news that there's a drought throughout the state. So let me turn it over to Joe and let him talk a little bit more about what's happening statewide and what the governor's saying. Joe?
Thank you, Craig. So as you are aware, we are experiencing our 2nd year of drought conditions. In fact, drought conditions seem to be part of the way of life in Southern California these days. So we're obviously monitoring the outlook on water supplies, and nearly 50% of the state is currently experiencing exceptional drought conditions, as you can see here in the map. to your left, essentially what we're seeing are higher temperatures and below normal runoff, which is attributing to lower levels in our storage reservoirs. And Craig will go into some detail as far as the reservoir levels and some of the differences that we're observing relative to storage levels in Northern California versus storage in Southern California. And one thing I wanted to note is that over the last 2 decades, all of us that are part of the Metropolitan Water District, we've made significant investments in water storage so that we can mitigate the impacts of drought conditions. So as we entered this drought period, we entered this drought period with a historical level of storage that we had at Metropolitan of 3.2 million acre feet of dry year and emergency storage. That is a record or historic level for Metropolitan. So although we recognize that we had made the right investments in the region to meet the drought conditions, obviously we want to be vigilant and we want to continue encouraging efficient use of water on a regional and statewide level. Let's go on to the next slide, please. So as you're aware, in July of this year, the governor declared a drought emergency. Essentially 50 out of the 58 counties are in a drought emergency. Now, none of those counties currently include Southern California. Now that may change. The drought declaration does provide for flexibility to modify those that are part of the drought declaration or emergency declaration. So we do anticipate that the governor may revisit the drought declaration later this month. Having said that, as part of his declaration, he called for a 15% voluntary reduction below 2020 figures. Now, as we'll get into here, that may be a challenge in certain aspects because over the last many years, all of us, including Eastern and Western, we've reduced our consumption significantly. And there is something that's called demand hardening that we're facing. So we do want to get the message out for our customers in the region to conserve water. But at the same time, we are concerned that the governor may at some point look at the data and decide that he will want to change from a voluntary reduction to mandatory restrictions. Let's go on to the next slide, please. So impacts to imported water. As some of you are aware, the State Water Project, currently our allocation is 5%. Now, under 100% allocation, Metropolitan, as a State Water Project contractor, would receive about 2 million acre feet of water. So currently that allocation is about 100 or a little bit under 100,000 acre feet. Having said that, the outlook for 2022 looks somewhat bleak. Indication are that we may start the year at 0% allocation. And as we go through the winter and looking at the snowpack, Department of Water Resources will adjust that accordingly. So given the bleak outlook on imported supplies, the State Water Resources Control Board has taken a number of actions to curtail water orders on the Delta water rights holders. Also, in addition to the State Water Project conditions, as you probably have seen in the news, there's also reduced levels along the Colorado River, specifically at storage in Lake Mead, which is currently at 35% of capacity, and Lake Powell, which is currently at 31% of capacity. And that obviously impacts ag as well as hydroelectric energy production. And with that, I'll turn it over to Craig.
All right, thanks, Joe. So why is Southern California not in a drought emergency? So it's kind of counterintuitive. It's hot, it's dry. We haven't had a lot of rainfall. Why aren't we in the same boat as the rest of the state? Well, this tells a little bit of the story. So if you look at the large reservoirs in Northern California, Lake Shasta and Lake Oroville, they're very low, 27% of capacity, 23% of capacity. San Luis Reservoir in the central part of the state, which is kind of an operational flexibility facility for the State Water Project, is at 14% capacity, Castaic 28%. But look what happens when you get to Southern California. Lake Matthews 76% and Diamond Valley 78% of capacity. So because we've invested in this storage that Joe referred to earlier, we actually have quite a bit of water that we have access to here in Southern California. And the way we got through the last drought, 4 years ago, concluded 4 years ago, was we had this Diamond Valley Reservoir. So that was a reservoir built by Metropolitan, not by the state, by Metropolitan and all of the customers, we're being one, Easterns, one, our customers have paid the fees to build those facilities. So that's our water. It's all state project water. So it was filled in the last few wet years. And Metropolitan did a fantastic job getting that facility ready for this dry condition. Next slide, please. So here's a little graphic of storage at Metropolitan, and drives the engineers crazy because there's not a y-axis. But if you look at 2020, that's 3.2 million acre feet of water that is in storage just in preparation for this dry period. You look back at 2012, 13, 14, 15, that was the last drought. So you saw storage levels get down really low. And as soon as it got wet, Metropolitan started socking away water in all sorts of, not just Southern California surface water reservoirs, but in groundwater storage throughout the state. And they've acquired rights in those groundwater basins to do that. So Metropolitan has declared a water supply alert now. That's kind of the next step in Metropolitan's methodology of alerting their customers that it is a dry period and we have to really take care and be paying attention. They could go to an allocation in the future. We're not hearing that yet, but it might happen. But why is it that we're not in a drought in Southern or emergency in Southern California? Joe mentioned we're only at 5% allocation on the state project. Well, the great news for Metropolitan is there's two different sources of water at Metropolitan. There's the Northern California, and then there's the Colorado River. Well, part of that 3.2 million acre feet is Colorado River storage. So Metropolitan's still going to get 1 million acre feet out of the Colorado system, and they still have storage over there. So, we're missing a lot of water coming from the north, but we're making it up with water that's coming from the Colorado River. So that's how we get through this. Next slide. So let's get to what, so we have a messaging challenge for sure. The governor's messaging drought emergency. The water districts and our customers have invested all this in storage, so we're not as bad off as the rest of the state. But we don't know where this drought's going. We don't know if we're in year 2 of a 2-year drought or year 2 of a 10-year drought. So it's very prudent for all of us to start implementing water conservation measures. We want that savings account of water to last as long as we can make it last. Next slide. So we've formed a regional partnership with Eastern, Western, Inland Empire Utility Agency, San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District to start upping our campaign to talk about drought and water efficiency. So the campaign was launched in 2021, August of 2021. It's in collaboration with Metropolitan, and it very much aligns with their messaging. And it's kind of unique to Southern California. We're used to this in Southern California. We very rarely have an average year. It's either dry or it's either wet, and it's dry about 70% of the time. So we as Southern Californians, we should know what to do. We know that when it's dry, we need to start being more efficient. And so this campaign is trying to capitalize on the fact that we know how to handle this, and we know that it's time to turn back our water use, and now's that time. Next slide. So there's kind of three phases to the campaign. First is keep it up, stay efficient. That's where we are right now. If the drought continues or gets worse this winter, it's going to move to step it up. And then finally, it's going to get to cut it back if things continue. And we really need to start taking more significant cutbacks in our water demands. And that would be maybe, eliminating some outdoor watering capabilities and, really starting to cut back from our normal water usage. But right now, it really is about trying to be efficient and hopefully meet what the governor's talking about is a 15% voluntary cutback. But we're going to give you a little bit more on the likelihood of that. Next slide. So Joe, let's go back to you and tell us what Eastern's up to.
Sure, thank you, Craig. So as I mentioned earlier, the governor's called for a 15% reduction in water consumption. And one thing I wanted to point out that for Eastern, when we exited the last drought conditions, we continued in our stage 2 of our water shortage contingency plan. And we have continued to call upon our customers to conserve up to 25% of water through various efficiency measures, including, for example, reducing the number of days they water outside landscaping by 1 day a week, immediately identifying and repairing any type of leaks they see in their water system, and refraining from filling or refilling ornamental lakes or ponds, and also refraining from washing a vehicle using potable water, versus going to basically a car wash where that water is recycled multiple times. One thing I want to point out on this slide is that the graph on the right-hand side, you'll see there essentially the per capita water consumption per day over the last couple of decades. What you'll notice is that that number has dramatically reduced for Eastern from around 215 gallons per day per person to where we are at today, about 125. That represents about 40% reduction. So that's a significant reduction in conservation and efficiency that our customers have responded to our calls. So that's why when we look at the 15% additional conservation that the government is looking for based on 2020 levels, we do see that the demand hardening, and it's not just us, it's other water agencies as well. One thing to note here is that about 60% of the water consumed is for outdoor. We strongly believe that indoor conservation, we've done a great deal. We've put in the low flow fixtures. So at this point, I think there may be an opportunity to focus more on outdoor irrigation versus trying to continue to try to ratchet down the indoor water consumption. Let's go on to the next slide, please. So a key tool in our ability to work with our customers to encourage conservation is our budget-based tiered rate structure. Essentially, this is available to all of our customers, including residential, commercial, and industrial customers, whereby we look at their unique set of conditions in terms of, for example, for residential units, how many occupants, how much of a front yard or backyard do they have a pool, and then we develop a unique water budget for them. And essentially, they pay within the first tier 1 and tier 2 for the water budget. If they stay within the water budget, if they exceed their water budget, there's a higher rate and they go into a tier 3. And if they're wasting water, then they go into a tier 4. What I'm really pleased about is, as you look at this chart here, 80% of our customers consistently stay within the water budget that is provided to them. And that's within the first 2 tiers of the water budget. In addition to this tool, we also have a number of other programs, financial assistance and rebates. For example, currently Metropolitan provides $2 per square foot to remove turf and then put in drought tolerant landscaping. We add another $1 to that, so we have a total of $3 a square foot. We also recently launched our Landscapes for Living program. If you go on our website, that is a resource as far as what rebates and programs, and also we have certification for landscape contractors that go through a course that we provide, whereby they become familiar with the appropriate pallets for landscape plantings, and as well as irrigation, drip irrigation. So this website is really a wealth of information for our customers, and we are currently communicating that so they can access all of those programs. With that, I'm going to turn it over back to Craig.
All right, thanks, Joe. From Western's perspective, very much the same story as Eastern. So here's a very similar graph in the bar form rather than a line graph, but it shows the same story. Back in 2007, we started implementing water conservation measures, including water budget rates and a drought and a lot of water conservation measures. So smart controllers, indoor rebates on toilets and washing machines and shower heads, and all sorts of things that have cut our per capita demand in half. So very effective. The budget-based water rates work great, and our customers have responded. And so you see a phenomenal drop in per capita use. And so next slide, please. So, how do you get more out of your customers is the challenge. So we're still trying. We haven't given up yet. We have a lot of master gardener workshops. So we're trying to get people to convert their outdoor landscapes away from turf that's not utilized. Turf is very thirsty. People like having, yards in Southern California, but that is a very thirsty garden. So we have these landscape style books that we produce and hand out to the customers. They're online. It shows you how you can convert from turf to a very beautiful landscape. We still continue with indoor and outdoor rebates. So whether it's clothes washers, irrigation-based controllers, the picture on the right is a Ratio irrigation-based controller that follows the weather. So it's always watering what your plants need, not how you set your timer. It modifies throughout the year. High efficiency toilets, sprinkler heads. We're doing the same turf rebate programs at Eastern. We partner with Metropolitan. We provide some additional funding to really incentivize people to take that non-functional turf out of the yards and put in something that's way more water conscious. Next slide. All right, so what's our ask? What do we need out of everyone? This is an influential group, and we think that, you know, we got to get the message out. So when you look at the governor's call for 15% voluntary reductions, that's going to be a challenge because we've already reduced. We reduced way before the governor said that. So based on 2020, we're very efficient. It's going to be very difficult to get 15% more, but we should still be advertising. We want people, there's still some people that aren't efficient. Like Joe said, our number is about 78% of people that are within our budget, water budget. Theirs was 80%. So there's still people out there that need to kind of become more efficient. So we want to cross promote the messaging and the rebate information. We've crafted all of this messaging so that it's usable by all the cities, county, any other water agencies. We'll hand you the package. You can update it to meet your individual needs, but we've tried to create this whole outreach campaign to be generic so that everyone can utilize it. We're all on the same page. We recommend that you invite people to your city council meetings so that they can come and speak, bring an expert to the city council. We're happy to be there if you want us, or Eastern will be happy to be there if you'd like to hear from Eastern, you're in their service area. Still want to enforce efficient landscapes. So as we're in the planning process for new development, a lot of discussion about development with the TUNF discussion, but we need to make sure we're utilizing water efficient landscapes in all new development. Fix leaks. We have a program where we'll come out and help customers fix leaks and identify leaks. So a lot of information here. We're here to help. We want to have a unified message. We're better together. And, you know, we want to be able to make sure that we have enough water supply forever. So help us out. We're here to help you. With that, Joe, any closing comments?
No, I think we covered it all, but I'd be happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Can we get credit for this?
Committee member Bash has his hand raised, and then committee member Benoit.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry, I can't. I was able to see him. Chris, can you get to the top of the screen? That's what it is.
Ready?
Oh, go on, Kevin. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. So one of the things that when a developer comes to your town is you've got to be able to guarantee 10 years of water. And we say we can, but is that really a realistic statement? We were forced by the state of California to approve 320 units. And we're a town of 25,000. We do have a very good water system, but can anybody actually say they can guarantee 10 years of water?
Yeah, so we have, through the CEQA process, we have to provide an analysis and be able to serve customers, and we look at a longer period than 10 years. It's a very good question, especially now. This always comes up during a dry cycle. The way I like to refer to it, though, is California is always in a wet, dry cycle. So we're like I said, 70% of the time we're in dry hydrology. And this becomes a very intense question every time we're in dry hydrology. But as water planners, we take our responsibility very seriously to plan for the future. So we do water supply master plans that are looking out 20, 30 years. And we look at our regional entities like Metropolitan. We work with them to see what their long-term planning is, and we look at our long-term planning. And for sure, within that 30-year period that we look at, there's going to be several droughts along the way. Drought's a short-term problem. So we have to figure out how to get through the short-term problems. But one of the reasons that water efficiency is so important is because that's part of our formula to meet future demands. And from, you know, the water industry standpoint, we can find more water. It just gets more and more expensive as we have to go further and further out. You know, we can all go to ocean desal, but it's 3 times as expensive as getting imported water from Northern California or for Colorado. So we certainly want to utilize the cheaper sources of water, but ultimately it's a cost issue. And so I think we do the water supply assessments. We look at it very closely, and when we say we can provide the water, we can provide the water.
And I would just add, we have a similar process to Western, as Craig described. I would just add that each agency has to prepare an urban water management plan, where we look at not only normal conditions, but dry year conditions and multiple dry year conditions. And we look at those demand projections based on land use and the water supply portfolio that we have. And then, as Craig mentioned, we will take water supply assessments for individual developments, recognizing that some will densify based, from the assumptions we made in our urban water management plan. We do see certain projects come in with a higher count, density count than originally planned. But we look at that, and we look at our overall water supply portfolio. We look at our local resources, and we have been able to successfully certify that we're able to provide water to those customers, and we're very confident we will going forward. Having said that, that is again a reason why we need to continue working very closely with Metropolitan. There's a number of long-term strategic programs at Metropolitan, as well as each of our agencies have undertaken, to make sure that we have that certainty and long-term water supply to meet growth. So we're confident that we do have the water supply. We're not seeing a situation where we're going to have to reconsider issuing certifications for development.
And then, so does that mean that you can supply water for the interior uses? But let's say that one of the things you're trying to do is create buffers between your single family unit neighborhoods and your apartment units. Does that mean you may come to something where they say, okay, you can't supply water for the foliage and you just let it all die? I mean, are we looking at a situation like that? Or, because obviously your higher foliage requires more water.
Yeah, what we are encouraging is drought tolerant landscaping, not necessarily letting landscaping die. In fact, we think that's a wrong message. We think we can have attractive landscape palettes that are drought tolerant versus non-functional turf. We have successfully converted, just in the Eastern service area, 10 million square feet of non-functional turf. We've removed that over the last many years. And as both us and Western have continued to provide those financial incentives, but we don't foresee a time where we're not going to irrigate at all. We just need to be very efficient in our drip irrigation systems and the drought tolerant landscaping that we install.
I would add that we still have a lot of room to go outdoor as a region to conserve more water. The average customer is overwatering their outdoor landscape. We certainly have some customers that are very in tune with the water needs of their outscore, but we still have customers that are watering 7 days a week. And so there's a lot of outdoor conservation and messaging that can still be done. We're a long way from efficient water use outdoors. And so I think if the drought continues and it gets worse, and if it goes on for a number of years, you'll see the messaging from the water district shift, and it'll really start hitting harder on outdoor water use. But from a long-term standpoint, like Joe said, there's lots of regional programs, statewide programs, and local programs that are going to be continuing to build water supply for our region.
And then my last question, sorry for the questions, but one of the things that we condition this project is that every single unit would have its own meter. And what we're now being told is that that could stop them from building one unit. Could be too expensive and cost prohibitive. And they're basically saying we only have to do each building. Do you guys know anything about that?
This is for multifamily housing.
Yeah, it's apartments.
I don't know anything about that project. I know that this has been an issue in the water industry. You know, you get statewide regulations that say that, you know, we have to utilize 55 gallons per person per day indoor. And then someone will come back and say, well, in multifamily housing units, we don't know what's happening indoors in each unit. So you are kind of blind to the usage in multifamily units. And so I think that's trying to address that.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Mr. Benoit.
Thank you. So one of those efficiency issues is the turf replacement programs. I see that you guys do offer, I think, very generous incentives for that. But what I recognize is that's only for your service areas, correct? It does not include the cities that are within your territory that are serviced by another entity. So for instance, I live in the city of Wildomar where we're serviced by Elsinore Valley Municipal Water District. They're only adding a quarter per square foot. So is there any other way that someone could take advantage or our residents could take advantage of that? Or is it going to be based on the entity that's serving us?
Well, they're adding, did you say a quarter to Metropolitan?
The Metropolitan, but you guys are, for instance, adding $3 for the first 1,000 square feet. So
we're adding $1 to Metropolitan's $2, so you get $3. So they're only adding 25 cents. I mean, that's up to Elsinore Valley. You may see a more lucrative program coming out of Metropolitan in the future. So I think you kind of need to stay on top of it a little bit. As things get drier, they may up that incentive.
Yeah, and I would add that as an Elsinore customer, you do have access to Metropolitan's $2 a square foot plus the quarter. But one thing I would add as far as non-functional turf, we think there's an opportunity for us to elevate a conversation, frankly, statewide about removal of non-functional turf. Especially, I think local cities and local government can really play a key role in messaging out the removal of non-functional turf. We think it's time. It's, you know, we've gone through droughts before, we're going through it again, and we strongly believe that there's a more efficient way to utilize potable water. And when you see non-functional turf in medians and parkways, especially sometimes there's over irrigation of that non-functional turf, and you see water running down the street. It's hard to message out to our customers to conserve and use water efficiently when they see that. So going forward, we are supportive of having conversation statewide about how can we work together with cities and local agencies to remove non-functional turf. But we understand there's a funding or a financial component to that, and we want to have that conversation with the state. Can the state play a role in funding the removal of non-functional turf?
And just to add on to that too, Ben, being the Metropolitan member rep on Western's board, I went to a recent workshop here with the Met board, and that discussion has started to take place. So we are starting to talk about that as the Met board, realizing that it's moving into drought and we've got to give options to customers to be able to be more efficient. So just wanted to kind of share that point.
Mr. Barajas.
Thank you, Chair. I was trying not to drag us out, but I'm like, I might want to ask some questions and comments. Wanted to comment on this is when you start reducing water use, your operating costs don't reduce. Those are things that we want to make sure we're very transparent with our customers or your customer, that when they reduce water use, operating costs stay the same. So eventually it will lead to increased rates to cover the deficit in revenue and operating costs. At least that's been my experience. So it's always a double-edged sword on that, on conservation. The one question I want to ask is, what are the plans or any projects for desalination or better worded reverse osmosis? And are we looking at interconnections between various agencies to see how we can better supply water back and forth through Southern California?
Sure. So on the costs, if we can get people to use less water, hopefully they're paying a lower water bill. So we hope that that's a cost savings. And we do hear that, well, you're just going to restrict us, but then you're going to raise your rates. And that's not really the case. I mean, rates do go up, but when we try and get people to be efficient, we're not doing that just so that, and then have to raise rates later. As far as desal, both agencies, Western and Eastern, already do brackish desal, same technology as seawater desal, but we do it in groundwater basins that have high salt content. So we're basically recovering capacity in these groundwater basins with water that wouldn't be usable. So we're actually, kind of exploring and mining unusable water, putting it through reverse osmosis and coming out with a product that's phenomenal quality and serving it to our customers. So we do that. And then, sorry, Joe, I'm on a roll, but interconnections are a way of life with water agencies. Joe and I share interconnections. We have interconnections with almost all entities and, primarily for emergency purposes. But today, it's all about sharing resources. And both Western and Eastern, especially Western, that's my world, we've invested a huge amount of money in being able to move water around in our service area. We can literally move drops of water now from the Chino Basin all the way out to Lake Elsinore. And so that's through a huge investment in pumps, desalters, pump stations, pipelines, and metropolitan interties. So that's just part of the game. We do a lot of that.
Craig, could you mention too, for the sake of the council member who's asking that about the Chino
Brenda,
desalter? Yes.
Brenda,
Mhm.
we're losing our quorum and we've got some stuff we have to take care of.
Oh,
And I know
sure.
it's a conversation, but we're long past a half an hour and we are losing folks. So I apologize.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate
We
it.
appreciate the information. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Okay, item D, Casey.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Casey Daly, Director of Energy and Environmental Programs. Today, we're going to be having our annual review of PACE delinquencies and a request to defer judicial foreclosure. So very briefly, back in 2015, the Executive Committee adopted a policy to review on an annual basis the number and amount of delinquencies. This was to determine the collection rights or to begin the judicial foreclosure process. For this last tax year, 2020, 2021, just under 40,000 assessments were levied on parcels totaling a little over 116 million. As of August 10th this year, the preliminary delinquency rate is 1.32% or 1,542,000. For comparison purposes, last year, the rate was 1.43. Next slide, please. So in order for us to ensure that a delinquency on your PACE assessment does not result into a foreclosure, WRCOG partners with First National Assets, who is a third party that purchases the delinquent receivables. The Executive Committee may remember back in August, it approved the purchase and sale agreement with FNA for this purpose. Partnering with FNA ensures that no property owners will be subject to a judicial foreclosure as a result of a PACE delinquency. And we are here today to ask next slide, please, recommend that the Executive Committee adopt Resolution 23-21. That was extremely brief, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions on this item?
See no hands raised.
This is a big item and okay. Do
Sorry
we
to
have
stop you,
anybody?
but-
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Matt.
City Banning,
Yes.
Beaumont,
Yes.
Calamasa,
Yes.
Canyon Lake, Corona,
Yes.
Eastvale,
Yes.
Hemet,
Yes.
Rupa Valley,
Yes.
Lake Elsinore,
Well,
Yes.
because the sun went. down.
Menifee,
Yes.
Moreno Valley, Murrieta,
Yes.
Norco,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Riverside, San Jacinto,
Yes.
Temecula,
Yes.
Marino, I'm sorry, Wildemar,
Yes.
District 1, District 2,
Yes.
District 3, District 5,
Yes.
Eastern Municipal Water District,
Yes.
Western Municipal Water District.
Yes.
That concludes roll call vote for that item and it passes unanimously.
Thank you. Okay, I don't believe that Mr. Van Weyden is on for a technical advisory committee.
I don't believe it is, Madam Chair.
Okay, we'll move on to our committee representatives, Mr. Tisdale. CalCog.
Yes. Yeah, we did have a meeting in September. Just a couple quick things. And the regional leadership, we do every year. It was scheduled for Riverside last year during the pandemic. It will be held in Riverside. They will do it, and it's going to be March 7th and 8th, and that's of 2022. Just one other thing, a lot of the things, the laws that CalCog tracks, they were already mentioned by the League of Cities. But I do want to say that for CalCog, though, we do have one unique sort of challenge because we have a policy where we have to have overarching consensus, which means majority of the board has to agree on issues. And of course, when an agency as large as CalCog, where you have, so our northern folks have a tendency to think a little different than our southern folks. So that's a challenge. But if anyone wants to look at what they, what we approve and what we agree on to support, they can go to the CalCog page. And then the next meeting that we're going to have it in person in November, and we don't have a date on that yet. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's the end of my report.
Thank you, Brian. Crystal, do you have a report on Sandag?
No, I'll keep it short. No.
Okay. I don't believe I saw, is Mr. Hoffman on?
I saw him join.
I'm here. I've been sitting quietly back there. As far as the SAPA and OA, just so everyone knows, the Proposition 1, Round 2 funding is probably going to go out soon. So please check for future funding opportunities through the SAPA website. They're going to put it there. They're finishing up the touches on that. You're looking at a possibility. I'm glad the water guys were on earlier because there's, for our area and upper the watershed, that's $12.3 million. For the disadvantaged communities, it's $4 million. And that's out of the total of $27 million that's going to be out there. Please get a hold of Ian Archmore, the senior watershed manager. Again, and please go on the website for SAPWA and go into future funding sources. For those agencies that are going to partake in this, you might want to start early on filling out the applications to see what you need and don't need if you have been to any of the workshop presentations. They're going to be looking heavily at recharging water, the aquifers, and that as the targets for spending this money. So again, the water guys are right. We have to take care of ourselves. So thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Ted. Mr. Benoit, AQMD.
Sure, I'll give you a quick update. We did have a board retreat. It was a 2-day board meeting basically out in the Coachella Valley. We also had representatives from CARB, or the California Air Resources Board, and as well as EPA come down for that retreat. It was a very collaborative effort. We spoke about many different items, but probably one of the biggest items that we've been looking at lately is we do have an attainment deadline in 2023 coming up at the end of 2023 for our attainment for the ozone levels. And unfortunately, we are not making that, we're not making as much progress as we would hope. In fact, that's the last active year, we actually went up. So we're really looking to try and figure out other ways to get towards that attainment deadline. Currently, we don't have a whole lot more moving forward at this point. but we will be working on that. And just a quick update, for a lot of our partners in both the water districts and also our city partners, if we don't reach attainment, we do lose our federal tax dollars. It's the same sort of hammer that can come down, just like at SCAG for not doing our regional assessments. So this is a very important issue that's coming forward, and we'll continue to work on it there at the Air District. We also have a very large upcoming rule this November coming up for refineries. So that will be a very interesting rule as it moves forward for the refineries. We're moving to a command and control structure, and that's something that the state has required us to do. So we'll continue to move forward in that direction. And then also we had our elections for the chair and vice chair for the board for the years 2022 and 2023. And I'm proud to say that I will continue to be the chair, will continue to be the chair of the AQMD for the next 2 years. So with that, that concludes my update.
You got a report on the CARB opening?
Oh, yes, the CARB opening, that's in November. I was going to be, that's for next month, but I can go and report on that too. We do have CARB's new offices will be opening up in Riverside. I believe it's November 11th. Is that correct?
Probably not 11th, that's Veterans Day, but close around that time.
18th, 11th, somewhere towards that.
I have it on my calendar. I just wanted to put everybody's heads up that it's finally here. I know that was a big discussion for quite some time, so. Thank you, Mr. Benoit.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody from SCAG have any committee reports? Anybody from Regional Council? Okay, seeing none, we will go on and move to Executive Committee Chair. I have no report. Kurt, do you have a report?
Just very briefly, we'll be getting some communications to you regarding virtual meetings. As you know, with the new rules, they're a little bit tricky for those of us who happen to meet once per month as it is. So Steve and I are working through a few logistics with that, and we'll get back to you. Reminder to please complete the survey. That will still be open until Monday for all of you. Very much looking forward to your responses. Reminder that we're working towards strategic planning at the end of the year, and then sometime soon we'll have to figure out what the plan's going to be for January, because the regularly scheduled meeting would happen right after the holiday. And that'll conclude for me, Madam Chair.
Okay. All right, any future agenda items? Any announcements from any of my colleagues? Boy, now please stick around for a few minutes. We do have closed session. Janice is gonna get us in. Is there anybody wishing to make a comment before we go into closed session for the public?
And we do need to make an announcement as well with regards to the claim, the red language that was added to the closed session. We will be discussing a claim that was filed by Antonio Hernandez and Irene Hernandez.
So we need to keep a quorum. We'll make it as quick as we can. Okay, Janice, you want to move us, whatever we're doing?
Absolutely.
Move us, and we're just sitting here. We're moving.
Going from room to room.
I do know for future, we're gonna put a time limit on presentation.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.